Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's event. My name is Doug Rogers. I teach in the anthropology department, and I'm the faculty director of the program in Russian, East European, and Eurasian studies. Today is a special event not just because of our guest, who's one of the most well-known, most distinguished, and most fascinating journalists and broadcasters of the past 50 years anywhere in the world, but because, in a much smaller and more modest way, this is the first time that the words program in Russian, East European, and Eurasian studies are being uttered in public at Yale. Applause is appropriate. Our program dates from July 1st, 2018. And we think that the interest that we're hearing around campus and the full auditoriums like today are good evidence of expanding interest in the study of this part of the world. So thank you for coming. Look at our website, get on our newsletter. We hope to bring you many more events like this. I want to thank the Macmillan Center, the Council on European Studies, for helping us with this event. Also, and especially the Poynter Fellowship in Journalism and the Office of Public Affairs and Communication. Eileen O'Connor is somewhere here. Thank you very much for your partnership in this event and many other events we've had in the past and hope to have in the future. The plan for today is that I will turn things over to Konstantin Muravnik, who I'm also very grateful to for suggesting this program and for doing a lot of the work to make it happen. He'll introduce our guest, who will then speak for a little while, followed by a sort of open question and answer and discussion period. So without further ado, Kostya.
It is my distinct honor to welcome Vladimir Posner to Yale. Mr. Posner needs an introduction only for those who are too young to remember the 80s and the 90s in this country when he regularly appeared on Ted Koppel's Nightline and the Phil Donahue Show, and then co-hosted the Posner-Donahue Show on CNBC. At that time, he once visited Yale, so it's not a welcome, but a welcome back. Mr. Posner may also need an introduction to those who are detached from contemporary Russia, where he is omnipresent in the media. For the past 10 years, he has hosted a weekly show, Posner, where he interviews various national and world leaders from all walks of life. Gorbachev, Sakharov, Gaidar, Shoigu, Ted Turner and Vekselberg, Hillary Clinton and Sting, Michael McFaul and Ksenia Sobchak, among many others, had a chance to face Mr. Posner's thoughtful scrutiny and be judged by millions of Russian viewers. Mr. Posner's opinions on a wide range of questions, from politics to soccer, from history to gastronomy and arts, quickly go viral. They have become a fact of Russian life, to such an extent that he has been termed, half seriously, half in jest, the spiritual leader of the nation and its moral compass. This is despite the fact that Mr. Posner is Russian just as much as he is an American or French. He was born in France and christened in Notre Dame, grew up in the US, and came to Russia only at the age of 19. Perhaps this cosmopolitan aspect of his biography is what endears him to Russian public, tired, like any other public, of ideological agendas. Perhaps this ability to be simultaneously Russian and American and European attunes Mr. Posner to the subtleties of different perspectives and brings him one step closer to the much desired and no less appreciated objectivity and truth, especially now when the gaps separating governments and nations are only widening, and one side increasingly refuses to consider the views of the other. In his more than 5 decades in the field of journalism, Mr. Posner has done his share of partisanship and propaganda. However, this changed in the 80s, when he pioneered a project of so-called space bridges, or telebridges, that connected Russian and American audiences. Moscow viewers named him TV journalist #1 in 1989, and this high mark of recognition has never decreased ever since. In 1989, and from 1994 to 2008, Mr. Posner headed the Russian Television Academy. In 1997, he founded the School for Television Excellence, a platform for education and promotion of young journalists. He's written several books and made a number of documentary miniseries about different countries, their cultures and people. These films brought the US, France, Italy, Germany, England, Israel, and Spain closer to millions of Russian people. It is my hope that this conversation with Mr. Posner at Yale will also achieve what he has been so good at, that it will bring Russian views and opinions a little closer to our students and colleagues, and will maintain what we all need now the most, a dialogue based on mutual understanding and respect. So please join me in welcoming Vladimir Posner.
Quite an introduction. I'd like to say a couple of words about who I am and what I am, notwithstanding what we just heard. It's important that you understand that I don't represent anybody or anything, any organization, political, social, whatever. I represent myself. I am an independent journalist, and that's an animal that is disappearing in Russia and not only in Russia. I think for me it's important that I say that, and I hope I'm not going to speak long because I was told that we would have a conversation afterwards, and I think that might be the most interesting part of it because you have questions or views that you might want to share with me, and I can't guess them in advance. But there are certain things I'd like to say before we have that conversation. I'd like to say, first of all, that we are at an extremely dangerous moment today. Never have the relations between Russia and the United States, or the Soviet Union, that's what it was before, been at this level. During the worst times of the Cold War, when I was living in the Soviet Union, and I remember all that very, very well. Russians were anti-White House, anti-Wall Street, but not anti-American in their vast majority. In fact, there was a kind of a warm feeling vis-a-vis Americans. Today, that's different. Today, it's anti-American at the grassroots level, and there's a reason for it. Another thing that is, to me, scary is that neither side seems to be afraid of nuclear weapons. 30 years ago, those of you who are of my age certainly remember an American movie called The Day After, which is about what happens to you and to your country after a nuclear strike.
Told him that explanation was unacceptable.
The aorta is rising from the right ventricle and the pulmonary from the left.
What's wrong with you, Coop? Ain't you got no self-control?
Hang on. Okay.
Privacy.
You know, Dad, privacy.
I'm sorry, I'm just jumpy. Don't say I sound like Mom, please.
Ah, you saw 60 Minutes last night.
Mommy, can I make cookies? You can't make cookies. You're only 4. You could show me.
Sure, kids, go ahead, but clean up.
You getting sick on the pill or rolling up the haystack?
And congressional leaders of both parties, the president tonight declared all United States military personnel on worldwide Stage 2 alert.
Very important toward Berlin. French news agency has received conflicting reports of East German resistance.
So what's he got to do with anything? I'm not the one having the baby. Yeah.
What's going on? They say the Russians just invaded West Germany.
Including the use of tactical nuclear weapons. The Defense Department today reported...
Fantasyland.
You think they're making this up? You think this is War of the Worlds or something?
and stuff. There's not going to be a war, is there?
I'll call enable, thank you. Need turn on my mark. Standing by. 5, 4.
Those missiles have all gone off.
What's going on?
Those are Minuteman missiles.
There was fear of these weapons, as there was in the Soviet Union. There was a realization that these weapons can, and if used will, destroy our country. Today, there's a feeling, when you talk to people, it's as if there are no nuclear weapons. It really doesn't seem to play a role in how we act. And the danger of not a deliberate nuclear exchange, but an accidental one, has grown because the level of mistrust between the two countries has grown as well. There have been several times in the past when computers warned of a nuclear attack, but it never got to the real thing because people took the time to really check it out. Now, they didn't have a long time. If an ICBM is launched from Russia, it'll take about 10 minutes for it to hit the US. So you don't have and vice versa, obviously. So you don't have a long time, but you do have some. But my feeling is that if today those same computers malfunctioned and said on either side that an attack has been launched, the response would be immediate. Because the feeling is that this is what's going to happen. Not that long ago, we were all very optimistic, weren't we? Gorbachev, Gorby, Russians, we're going to be friends, we're going to be... And in such a really short period of time, how did this happen? Why are we at the point that we are today? And I'm not saying who's to blame, because that's not a productive way of looking at things. But we should try to understand exactly what did happen. The Soviet Union, once Gorbachev took over, didn't really last very long. He came to power in March of 1985, and by December 1991, there was no more Soviet Union. Some people say it collapsed. It didn't collapse. In a place called the Belaruskaya Pushcha, which is a kind of a forest, 3 presidents, the president of Ukraine, the president of Belarus, and the president of Russia proper, Mr. Yeltsin, decided to part company, decided to disband the Soviet Union. Now, each had his own reasons, definitely, but if we look at Mr. Yeltsin, his reason was very clear. He was the president of Russia, so he was number 2 to Gorbachev, because Gorbachev was president of the Soviet Union, of which Russia was part, the largest part, but only part. Get rid of the Soviet Union, and there's no president, and you get rid of Gorbachev. And that's precisely what he did. So no more Soviet Union, quickly no more Warsaw Pact, of course. That is to say, countries that were usually called Soviet satellites were part of a military alliance with the Soviet Union. That alliance disappeared.
The Warsaw Pact, formation of the Warsaw Treaty Organization, the Cold War, 1955. The threat of West Germany's entry into NATO in 1955 caused the USSR to retaliate by forming the Warsaw Pact, or Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation, and Mutual Assistance. Like NATO, a collective military was formed, but signed among the Soviet satellite states of Eastern Europe and was dominated by the USSR. If one country within the pact was attacked, the others would come to its aid. This created a counterbalance to NATO.
And so the United States had to figure out, how do we deal with this new entity called Russia? How do we deal with it? There's no more Soviet Union. What is going to be U.S. policy vis-a-vis this country? And of course, Yeltsin also had to think about what is going to be Russia's attitude towards the United States. You may remember that soon after the Soviet Union ceased to exist, in I think it was February of 1992, Yeltsin came to the United States and he addressed a joint session of Congress. And he said, the people of Russia are offering their hand to the people of the United States in friendship to build a better world, a world without war, a world without peace.
Я прошу аплодисменты не засчитывать на время моего выступления.
Please don't count the applaud against the time that I have been allotted for speaking.
Уважаемый господин спикер Палаты представителей, уважаемый президент Сената, уважаемые члены Конгресса, дамы и господа.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, members of Congress, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a great honor for me to address the Congress of the great land of freedom as the first ever, over 1,000 years of history of Russia, popularly elected president, as a citizen of the great country which has made its choice in favor of liberty and democracy.
Долгие годы наши государства представляли собой два полюса, две крайние противоположности. Нас хотели сделать непримиримыми врагами, и это самым трагическим образом отражалось на судьбе человечества. Мир сотрясали...
For many years, our two nations were the two poles, the two opposites. They wanted to make us implacable enemies. That affected the destinies of the world in a most tragic way. The world was shaken by the storms of confrontation, It was close to exploding, close to perishing beyond salvation. That evil scenario is becoming a thing of the past. Reason begins to triumph over madness. We have left behind the period when America and Russia looked at each other through gun sights, ready to pull the trigger at any time. Despite what we saw in the well-known American film, The Day After, it can be said today, tomorrow will be a day of peace. A day less of fear and more of hope for the happiness of our children. The world can sigh in relief. The idol of communism, which spread everywhere social strife, animosity, and unparalleled brutality, which instilled fear in humanity, has collapsed. It has collapsed never to rise again. I am here to assure you, we shall not let it rise again in our land.